Hello everyone, James Donaldson here with The Contemporary Gentleman, and great ways to support us are on Patreon, on Instagram, and buying our Spy series off of Amazon. Link below. Alright everyone, in today's video we're going to be talking about the Glock 17L long slide, whatever you want to call it. Basically, we're going to talk about issues with it, if we've had any, which we have, and ownership, should you get one, all the fun stuff. So, let's go ahead and without any further ado, let's dive into those details. Now, I do want to throw out a subjective warning. Some of the information is based on my experience and my experience alone. So, there's, of course, therefore, more than one opinion on these guns and how they operate. So, by all means, do your due diligence. Alright, so jumping right into the meat and potatoes, Glock 17L long slide, very rare gun. They are not produced past Generation 3, so this is a Gen 3. I've got gripes about that, but we can talk about that in a minute. That said, even when they were kind of newer, it was a newer thing, it was rare. They were made Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3. They were pretty much the only Glock, to my knowledge, that shares a name kind of with another variant. So it's the long slide version of 17, they call it 17L. Now I will say that as far as the gens and their respective generations, 2s and 3s can actually swap slides, grips, etc. And this lower receiver, grip, whatever you want to call it, frame, it is identical to Glock 34 and 17 from similar generations, so 2 and 3. I could put this slide on a Glock 34, etc. It's just part of the cookie cutterness of these guns that makes them so popular, especially for me. Now, the history of it is it came out for competition, as I understand it, and from there, the USPS box, IPSC, whatever, was shortened so that only a 1911 could fit. And so actually, if you look at a Glock 34, it fits. So the Glock came out with a 34 for competition because they tried to cut this out. So 34 is actually only the length of a 1911. It doesn't look like it, but it is. So if you're wondering if you could carry one, you may be surprised. It could be easier than you think, which is something I'm going to explore on my own. That being said, again, they are a rarity. I came across this one, bought it brand new, and while I've thought about selling it here and there, probably won't, but let's get into it. So when they first came out, of course it has this cutout right here, and that is for weight savings. Basically, this slide weighs just about the same as the 17 from its same generation. Part of that was because they didn't have to re-engineer anything, like the spring or the frame, grip, whatever you want to call it. That said, I think they should have done some engineering, and we're going to talk about that. But pretty much, they didn't. They literally just got a slide that was longer and a barrel, and that was it. The spring is even the same because the spring only goes to here. So The early ones were ported as well along here, but that wasn't why the cut, as I said. And they quit doing that. I appreciate that they don't do that, but that said, I would be curious to shoot one that was ported. I actually think it would, because of leverage being out here, I think that would have a fair amount of positive effect on keeping the gun level. Now that said, I wouldn't quite say I've mastered it, but I've gotten good at holding the gun level during recoil and really keeping it flat during that recoil impulse. And part of that is the mechanics of the gun itself. And finally, the rail. The rail came in Gen 3, and with the rest of the Glocks that have progressed past, such as this Gen 5 here, the rails continued from 3, 4, 5, and continue on. I actually use the rail. I do put lights on them, especially because I have holsters that index off the light, so it's very easy to put different guns on. I appreciate the rail. So all that said, the grip has also changed. I prefer the finger grooves, or no finger grooves, but it's really based on aesthetics more than anything. I don't care about them. So they weren't on Gen 1 and 2, now they're on 3. Other guns that went to 4, they were still in there, and now Gen 5, those guns don't have finger grooves, so great. Anyway, so the biggest factor to me is the feel. I'll never forget the first time I held one, and I held a Glock 34 at the same time. I was at a gun store in Missouri, and I'll just never forget bringing that weapon up and how easily it pointed. It's like the sights just line themselves up. And the other thing is the balance. I thought, and a friend of mine thought, it would be very nose heavy, and it is not nose heavy really whatsoever. It just blows me away how this gun feels. So I've got buddies that say, if you're ever going to sell it, hit us up. It'd be very hard to determine fair market value for a gun like this, but it's if you ever have a chance to at least hold one, you should at least do that, because it is impressive how smoothly it presents and how balanced it feels. So, aside from that, the recoil impulse is also very smooth. In fact, I'll roll in some footage with the suppressor. You can really just watch the slide move back and forth, and that's because physics. So, kind of getting into it, yes, Glock in terms of weight didn't have to change much, but the way the slide moves, it's just a slower impulse because the weight. So when you move weight around, even if you don't change the weight, it still has an effect on movement, especially because the slide doesn't just move backward. And even if it just did that, it'd still be different. But I mean, the barrel has to tilt, it has to unlock, the slide has to do a few things. And so the way that the weight is differently laid out on this versus its counterpart, there was probably some engineering they needed to do. Now, I surmise, I haven't had a conversation with Glock, I surmise that more engineering went into the 34 when it was created. I really kind of have no doubt about that. I'll also say that, talking to Glock, the spring is a pound less in the long slides. So my Glock 40 and the 17L, the spring is a pound less weight to push back, which I thought was interesting. I couldn't be an engineer because of my study habits, but that said, I do have very much an engineer mindset and understanding of things, and so I could surmise why that is, but you're not interested. So, let's move on to the next part. So going back to the balance, I have noticed that, of course, you feel the 147s more, but I almost feel it more with this 17L than I do my regular 17. I have a theory about that I'll say very quickly. The leverage of the force coming out here and wanting to push the gun back and up is further out, giving that power more leverage versus when I just have my 17 and I'm feeling that same 147 oomph, so to speak. So that is something, but again, you shoot it, you get comfortable with it, you master it, it's not a big deal. So appearance is another big thing. I love that there's no serrations. It's actually pretty easy to operate without the serrations, whereas I like the serrations on my other guns, but it's just elegant. I love how long. It reminds me of when you watch old westerns and some guy would pull out some ridiculously long barreled just intimidating looking iron revolver. It's just a cool thing, and it's like a modern take on that to me. Also, the simplicity of it. Glocks are very simple guns in the first place, and that's one of the things I very much appreciate about them. But the simple appearance of this gun is, again, being subjective, it's something that I find very attractive as far as a gun. So I've kind of hit on it already. The pointability, it's just incredible. I don't know what else to say about it. This does kind of slow down your target transition just a little bit, but most people are going to have to practice a fair amount to notice that, or shoot a fair amount to notice that, I should say. And some practicing, you'll get through it just fine. I would be interested to run this in like an unlimited class competition someday, just to see how it does. But yeah, pointability. Again, if you have the means to at least hold one, check it out. Alright, this is a suppressor host. So, I mean, with the threaded barrel, it is a 6.5-inch barrel. That's pretty much the length of some sub-guns, right? I mean, even changing calibers, a 6-hour MCX, you can get those with a 6.75-inch barrel. So it's a quarter of an inch shorter than that carbine. So what I'm getting at is there's a lot of room to dissipate the force, helping the suppressor's job become easier. So that's pretty great. On top of that, I would say that mainly the dwell time is a big thing. There's a lot of dwell time in there, or there's not much dwell time, which is a kind of a thing, a Glock thing for suppressing a Glock. So you do kind of get a little more port pop. I very much don't want to alter my guns, especially just to run them suppressed, because especially a gun like my carry gun is going to get ran, not suppressed, way more. So I'm not going to go changing things and screwing that up. As far as recoil management, it's just easy. The way the angle of the pistol is, the way the slide moves back forward, makes it very manageable. And of course, putting the suppressor, the weight of a suppressor on the front, it just makes it all the simpler. Now, reliability, I was shocked. I've actually had a fair amount of problems. Part of it's the suppressor that I'm using. A fair amount of problems suppressing this and having it run reliably. I've had very few issues with my 17L, and therefore the issues I've had, I haven't really been surprised. My GM45 and this gun do not get along, and this runs with my Osprey, with my GM45, no problem. So, pretty impressed. I will also add that I really like the CRYE barrel. It feels well made, it feels smooth, I've had no issues with it. Feeds reliably for the most part, and anytime there hasn't been a good feed, I kind of blame the suppressor. So, big fan of the CRYE barrel. Now, the gun also balances better than you think suppressed, not only because the gun's balanced well, so that helps, versus if it wasn't balanced well and you're adding weight to the end, even worse, but it's better. But then, the suppressors I've been using are monocore, so most of the weight is back toward the beginning, or the end of the barrel, and not hanging out as far. So, that's also been a factor that has helped things run reliably. Now, caveats and variables. So I actually had, I would say, with the first 100 rounds of this, I had a lot of problems. I was very disappointed when I first started shooting this. I had stovepipes, failure to feed, failure to extract. Possible causes for that, as I researched it, limp wristing. There's also this concept of grinding with the spring, or my grip was pushing the slide release up, and possibly the ammo, people call into question. Lots of forum topics, all that on there. I think, for whatever reason, you just had to break it in. Because ever since, I would say less than 100 rounds, but once I got 100 rounds through it, I might have even thrown some 124 through it. Just, I hear that helps break guns loose. That could be a myth, I don't know. But after about 100 rounds, I would say less, the gun runs like a Glock. So, if you do buy one, pull it out of the box and strap it on your hip to carry around. I would put some rounds through it first, build some confidence in it before I do that. Whereas I would not say that about other guns, just like my 17 here. Never had a problem with it. So, things to consider. Again, I don't know per se the cause of mine, because my grip has not changed much, if at all, since getting it. And I wasn't limp wristing it. I had a grip. So again, I don't know. And I already shot Glocks, and so I wasn't having an issue with pushing the slide stop up. Now this does have kind of a deal sticking out, so maybe that was it. But again, if you look at my grip, I don't think that was it. So if you're having problems with your 17L, put some more rounds through it, give it a chance. And if you're interested in buying one, hopefully this prevents you from being disappointed. And again, you might get it and it runs fine. So, but do keep in mind, mine was new, probably produced when I bought it, which is around, I would say, 2019. So anyway, yeah, so just because it's new doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. So holstering's been a bit of a challenge. That said, any open-ended holster for a Glock and 9mm is pretty much going to accept this. So that's great news. Holsters at the bottom, that's going to be almost impossible. Dara Holsters probably makes one. And that's kind of the only name I can throw out. Again, bottomless, so like a T-Rex Arms Ragnarok, it's going to take this all day. I have a Ragnarok that I use with the XC1 for outside the waistband concealed carry. This actually slides right in there even without the light on it, and holsters just fine. So depending on what you're looking for in a holster, you can find them. Concealed carry holsters, those are typically open bottom, so this will slide right in. Good luck concealing this though. I have tried, kind of a challenge. So thank God, as I said before, it has a light, because holsters I have will of course accept this gun with the light on it, which is nice. So there's a few of those. I'll put them down below in the description, but you're talking the Armordillo X-FER V2, the StandardoCo Hayden, and of course the T-Rex Arms Ragnarok will even accept it, the SD, and the normal Ragnarok. So we'll talk dislikes and then we'll bring it to a close. Magazine release. I hate that it sticks out. The 34s and 17Ls came with this extended magazine release, at least for Gen 3, and it fights with my support hand. So I can kind of clear it, but at the same time, through, let's say I pop off a bunch of rounds, several taps, it will cut into it. I haven't broken the skin actually, but it is irritating. So if I really hold on to this gun, I will be replacing that with something more normal. And I don't care if it's a little added piece, but it's not really in the way, it doesn't bother me, so I don't mind about that. Now, the thickness, in terms of my method of arms, the Gen 5 just fits different, and I can tell in my hand. And so when it comes to switching between these two, yeah, I don't really so much. So my whole thing with the Glocks, especially having them as similar as possible, is that it's very easy to transition from one to the other. It's not that it's that hard to transition to this, but it's not as easy as I was intending to make it. Plus, because you can't switch out the slides and grips, it'd be nice to have like a Gen 5 34 where I could put an X300 on, because this I have to unscrew. So whereas I conceal with that, it'd be nice to be able to just, oh, I want to use this light, I'll just move the slide. That'd be really great. Not going to happen with the 17L. Now, I do understand this is nitpicking, so take this with a grain of salt or however you want. The other thing is teaching new shooters. Gen 3s feel pretty blocky to a lot of people. I try to have all my guns have a purpose. This is the one that's in a gray area, and if I replaced it with the Glock 34 Gen 5, people I've talked to that did not like the feel of Glocks really like these Gen 5 grips. Gen 4 started to thin out a little bit, especially between here and here, which carried on with the 5s. Something different with the grip, though. I don't know what it is. I can't find any notes on it online. There's something with the grip, a dimension or something that's changed. It's very easy for people with smaller hands that don't like big gun, huge old grip in their hand. They like the Gen 5s. I may have swayed some opinions just by letting people hold mine. So, again, teaching people to shoot Gen 3, I mean, you're going to work with what you got, right? But at the end of the day, if I was to choose between this and a Glock 34 for things beyond just emotion, a Glock 34 Gen 5 would be my choice. Just going to throw that out there. Trigger, it's fine. I don't love that it's a lighter trigger, but again, that's just because I want all my triggers on all my Glocks to be the same. And so being a little different, but I mean, we're talking a pound or so it's really not a big deal. The slide cut out. So if it weren't for that, I would say this would be a great duty gun, and still might be, but you never know what kind of stuff could get in there and then prevent the gun from operation. And that's just not okay, especially, again, for a duty gun. So compared to a 34 and 17, if you're trying to figure out which of the three you want, probably 17 or 34. 17 is going to conceal decently, pretty easily, I would say, depending on your holster, depending on how you carry it. Conceal pretty decently inside the waistband, and especially outside with a jacket over it. 34, a little more of a challenge, but you get away with it. And for some of the reasons I listed, 34 versus a 17L, 34 is probably the way to go. So, the close. Is it worth it as your only gun? No, of course not. So what purpose does it serve? Well, that's for you to decide. For me, as I said, it serves in a gray area, but I will probably be getting a 34 to compare to it, at least as far as function. And I already know the 34 will best it in terms of how I can fit it into my components and how I conduct use of my guns already, especially as far as my Glock box is concerned. However, overall, it's a great gun. It's a fun gun to shoot. I think it's great looking, and it is also rare. So, this has been James Donaldson with the Contemporary Gentleman. Until next time, keep your composure.